If you were waiting to hear a U.S. president say, "I feel your pain," or if you were waiting to hear a U.S. president say, "It's them or us," that is not what you just heard. President Obama called the attacks here in Paris a setback at one point. He was asked, "Is it time for you to change your strategy?" More or less, he said no. "Have you underestimated the abilities of ISIS?" More or less, he said no. "Do you understand how to defeat ISIS?" His response: "This is a variation of the same question." President Obama has made it quite clear in that Q&A that lasted more than 45 minutes that he has accepted there are evils in this world and evils in places like Paris, France. And this is something that we all must face today. It's a reality in which the world we live. If you're at home wondering with your own set of anger and your own set of fears about what could happen next, you are not alone, because that's precisely what you feel here in Paris, France. And if you're waiting for clarification on your feelings through that Q&A, you weren't going to get it. The president's strategy, as stated over the weekend, continues as is. Brett Baer hosts a special report with me now. And Brett, you were listening. Your impressions from Turkey a moment ago.
Well, Bill, I tell you, this was striking. This was truly striking that the president, first of all, he started, and he obviously thanked his Turkish hosts. It took him about a minute to get into the attacks of Paris. He talked about cyber talks and climate change, and then talked about the Paris attacks. You're right. He said the strategy is essentially not changing. He was asked numerous times about whether he personally underestimated ISIS. Remember calling them JV just last week, doing an interview that said that they were contained on the ground in Syria and Iraq. And he pushed back and even seemed angry at some of those questions, he said, being similar. The problem was he never conceded that there was any misjudgment by his administration. And the big passion that you heard from the president was about refugees and how the U.S. has to continue to realize that there are men and women and children escaping terrorism. Meantime, across town, you have French President Francois Hollande talking to his Congress, starting with France is at war. ISIS cannot be contained. ISIS has to be destroyed, asking his Congress to establish 3 more weeks of an emergency session, emergency declaration of powers to enable him to go after ISIS in every way, shape, and form. So the contrast in those two speeches, obviously one a news conference at a summit and the other an address to Congress, but still the message, the contrast in tone and urgency was striking, Bill.